want to test something with this group. Most distributors today, I would say, the bulk of the dollars are still very transaction-based. You know, we'll provide competitive pricing and reliable service quote, but they're not really value-added. But from everything that's been described up here, 10 years from now, instead of that being the majority, the value-added distributor is going to be the majority of the volume will be going through those kind of relationships. Am I going too far with that? Is it really, or will the transaction-only people be a much smaller piece and the majority of the distributors be value-added?
Possibly. I mean, I think there's still a lot of value in handling the transaction side of the business. I mean, the basic tenets of distribution is still a very valid business model. And it's still a much more efficient way to go to market for a manufacturer. And it's a much more efficient way for a customer to shop. I mean, grocery store shopping versus one-store shopping. So there's still going to be a transactional side of the business. You know, the distributors that want to continue to grow and evolve are going to have all facets of this covered. But there's still a transaction side of the business for sure.
Yeah, I agree. The transactions will continue. The value for those transactions will be enormously important. I think it's already existing today, but in the future, it'll even be more so. There'll be a need for multi-channel. So the counters will be important, but so will apps, and a way to allow customers to get at us in many different, many different avenues. Amr talked earlier about the e-commerce play. That'll be really important. I also think that what we're calling value added today, tomorrow could be called transactional. So what is where you're adding, your parallel wire or your marking or your labeling, that, in the end, right, that becomes now the new deliverable. It's both certainly on the distribution side and even on the supplier side as they look to integrate and bundle and make their end customers' jobs easier. So we'll all continue to add value. There'll certainly be a huge number of transactions, but of course as time goes on, we have to continue to add more value for the same price, or we become extinct.
Yeah, just if you think about the way we used to do business, right? So the foreman would write a rec sheet up. He would fax it into the office. The purchasing agent or the project manager would then basically do it again, send it to you guys, who would then write it up on your end. I mean, I'll save my French, but that stuff's got to stop, right? I mean, so anywhere that we see double entry in our business, we're trying to eradicate that. So we're trying to go streamline directly from the field with limits, so you build in estimate limits into the purchasing system. So the field knows what they can buy. The field, it's restricted, so they can't buy 50 different types of Beeline struts. So if anybody from Beeline's here, that's a little plug for you guys. But yeah, I mean, we need to just streamline the process and get rid of the efficiency that you were talking about earlier, Walt. I mean, it's crazy.
So in the beginning, I really grabbed a hold of that idea of the definition of value added versus transaction, because where it may be risk-taking and a partnership experiment to try something, it adds more efficiency to the supply chain. And because you get a competitive advantage, that becomes the standard going forward for everybody else. And a lot of that's already gone on. So as we think about this disruption, somebody innovates, you get something going, you start to win a lot of business. From a manufacturer point of view, you get some share. That means it's squeezing the balloon, somebody else loses. It means people have to learn how to live with disruption. And without, I'm going to throw something at Amir here for a second. Well, for those of you that don't know, Amir lived through, when he went to Dell, it was untouchable and magic, and it went through basically a complete meltdown and rebirth that he lived through. And when we talk about change here, we have to us it's a big deal, but we've got it really easy compared to what you did, and I'm just were there any lessons that you learned in that could be applied here?
Well, first of all, I want to clarify there was no causal relationship there.
That's fair.
Yeah, no, look, I had the privilege of being there for 15 years and watching those cycles, and I won't talk about the company specifically, but there are at least 4 elements that I've observed, and this is just my opinion, that you have to be very, very thoughtful about to stay relevant. The first one is product itself. You know, Brian talked about the cycle time, right? You know, the QO breaker is celebrating its 60th anniversary, but you know, and it doesn't matter what you make, you have to remain obsessed about how you can make it better, how you can integrate more value, how you can make it simpler for your customers. Industrial design matters. And in the tech industry, no one embodies that better than Apple. The second part of it is business model innovation. You have to continue to think about how you want to do business, and we've talked a lot about that. Early on, Dell did a lot of that. Today, you look at Uber, look at Airbnb, you have entire industries like the taxi service and the hotel business being disrupted because of a business model change. It's not the technology, it's the business model. I think the third one is solutions. You know, we talk a lot about solutions, but too often, be honest, solutions are as a proxy of how can I sell all my crap to one customer, right? That is not a solution, that is your problem.
That's also a technical consulting term.
And a true solution is where you really understand the business of your customer and you're committed to creating value, and only when you create value do you get to participate. So I think in the tech industry, IBM did that better than anybody else. And then the fourth element is when you're big and you do something, the disrupting force that you're driving and you become really big, and Dell, you know, was a disruptor and then became very big. The legacy problem is a really hard one, because now you don't want to disrupt because you're the king. So how do you deal with legacy, and how do you deal with innovation when you're the incumbent? And I think M&A is a big part of that, you know, allowing companies to go develop entirely new ideas because they have nothing to lose, watch how that develops, and then, you know, acquire those companies to bring that technology in. And Cisco and Oracle did a really good job of that. So you have to have all four in plays going to be successful. Otherwise, you live through the roller coaster, and it's a hard thing to do.
It's a lot to take in. It's the business model innovation thing has you can just kind of go everywhere, and it's really easy to look at the other folks and go, well, the taxi guys are whining, or the car dealers are whining because of the Tesla, and they're all whining, and you can feel sort of superior, but it's much different when it's happening to you personally. It gets really ugly. So in terms of that acquisition thing, and I'll throw this to you, David, Sheely has grown by, you guys have had a very strong focus on organic growth, but you've also grown via acquisition. And there's a lot of distributors that haven't done acquisitions yet. Is knowing what you know now, is it something people should do, or do you have any advice for how they should not hurt themselves? Because we've all heard some horror stories.
So we've done two types of acquisitions. We've bought fixer-uppers, and we bought good companies. And I guess the lesson learned there is you kind of get what you pay for, right? So in hindsight, when you buy a fixer-upper, the absolute best you can hope for is to make them as good as you are. And that's a lot of distraction for your executive team, because they're spending a lot of time on that effort instead of growing your business and doing the things that we should be doing. When you buy a good company and you're selective about which people you put in leadership roles, regardless of the company they came from, when you select best practices from regardless of the company came from, you end up both becoming better. And so my recommendation is try and buy good companies.
Well, that's also where you get, where Amir was talking about the innovation. They've actually figured out another way to do things. If we're thinking forward, and we've got an audience here listening, and they're wondering about the future, and there's obviously no easy answers. From a leadership point of view, what is the leader that's going to be successful 10 years from now? What do they need that maybe makes them different than, if anything, than the leader of today? Because there's this whole pace of change thing going on that I'm kind of picking up. I mean, as you look at who you're going to pick for successors or recruit senior managers in your company, what do you need for people to do the next 10 years? And I'm going to start with my contractor friend here, who's fourth generation.
Yeah, that's great. You guys awake out there? I can't see you, but I can hear you.
No, this is kind of like when you go to the police station, they ask you a lot of questions.
I've been there.
Yeah.
Is this for the good side? I don't know. What do you think? We're driving our business right now through what's called transition to a values-based organization. And what that means is really getting employee engagement. The days of the benevolent dictator marching in a single direction, hoping everybody gets on his coattails, it's over. So if you want to engage with the younger generation who may or may not move jobs 6 or 7 times, they want to come back to work after taking their dog on a walk or whatever you said earlier. I see it. We're embracing it. And we're trying to adapt. Because the old way, certainly my grandfather led, or my great-grandfather, never knew him, but, and my dad, it's different. And so we're adapting to them, not trying to make them change to us. And if you can create an engaged workforce, I think there's some studies out there that say 70% of your employees at some point during the day are actively disengaged. And 50% are, no, 70% are disengaged, 50% are actively disengaged, which means they're going out of their way to screw you, which is scary. So if you can move that needle 10% and get people that much more engaged in your business, think about how much better you're going to be.
I'm still getting over that stat.
Amir
I have to think about that.
Amir got missile lock on that one.
You know, for us, it really is, to build on part of that, there's a democratization of ideas, right? So, you know, there's a new policy, it gets designed, it gets flowed down. It doesn't work that way. You give people tools, you make data transparent, share as much as you possibly can, and let people who are best informed at the right place with the right tools make choices. And leaders who can develop environments that allow for that are the type of leaders we want, right? You can't, with all this change we're talking about, regardless of your experience, know what will come. Because experience is a collection of what has happened, but not a predictor of the future. So you have to allow people to participate in that process. And the more engaged you can make them by giving them that responsibility, that's the sort of leadership we want.
I'll build a little bit on Amar's. You didn't end with any stats that I could comment on. But so for me, it's really about focusing in on the talent bench. And you know, for all the leaders, myself included, you know, we have to hire people that are better than us and people that can aspire to take our place and teach us some things. And in an environment where the market is changing, technology is changing, new competitors are right, we have to be willing to take chance and build a reward and environment where people can take chances and make mistakes without being executed for that. And at the same time, a learning environment where people get the opportunity to see a variety of different activities and businesses and functions and continue to learn and grow, and where good performance and success, you know, leads to real elevation in the organization in addition, you know, to promotions. And when you get that learning environment and you have that new talent, then your bench is a little healthier, and you know, when it's my time to go float on my boat, then someone is there, hopefully better than me, to take over.
You know, I think it's pretty simple with leadership. Or at least one word comes to mind, and that's trust. And I think leaders have to be able to create trust in the people that are following them. So particularly as the pace of change in business and everything else continues to get faster, being able to have trust, a clear purpose, and being able to communicate that mission to the people that are following you are the leaders who will be successful today and tomorrow. And being able to do that with a high degree of humility, to me is super important.
You said humility?
Humility.
Well, as you get older, you tend to get more in touch with your failures and mistakes. You know, I was listening to a college professor yesterday, and he said, when you're successful, you're happy, but you never quite know why you're successful. But when you fail, you always know why you failed. So in terms of the leaders and what you're looking for, what's your take on it, Walt?
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been talked about here. You know, I think it is a fact that people don't work for companies, they work for people. And I think leaders' ability to connect, communicate, and care. You got to be able to connect with them. And you look for leadership that really does listen and understand why that person's here. You know, there's a lot of how, there's a lot of what, but why does that person work here? And I think leadership is driven by caring and passion. Because if somebody likes it more than you do, it doesn't matter how long you've been doing it, how good you are at it. If they like it more than you, they're going to beat you.
Yeah, one thing real quick, we talk about this transition to a values-based culture. We surveyed, and I'm not a big fan of surveys, but we went out and surveyed all of our employees, and the number one thing that they wanted, the difference between our current state and the desired state, is they want accountability. Which I'm like, you want accountability? I'll give it to you. But
the employees ask for accountability?
Yes. Yeah. They want accountability, engagement, and like humor and fun. Those are the top 3 things.
Wow. Well, I mean, I back in the time of the dinosaurs before MTV, as a young person, I remember one of the biggest problems I had working in a distributor was trying to convince my boss to put me in. Trust me enough to I can go do this. You need to trust me with the resources. Let me go fix that branch. And trying to get him convinced that they could give me a chance was like and that's the accountability thing. It's really, really hard. And one thing, and we haven't talked about it here, and I want to touch on it because we're almost out of time, and with the oil thing, oil prices down and everybody gets all twitchy, and we had the what we call the Great Recession in 2008 and 9. I want to throw this at my friend Walt. And Walt's lived with the oil business for a long time. I bought my very first Rolex in a pawn shop in Houston when oil was 16 bucks a barrel because all the guys in the oil business had to sell it for pennies on the dollar. And you've lived with this, and everybody gets all emotional, and this industry worries about recession, the economy, and we talk about all this stuff. What advice would you have for people in terms of living with volatility? Because I know you've had a lot of experience with it.
Yeah, I may need a lift home from here. Somebody give me a ride. Well, I'll tell you that the most important thing I think is that you know, companies get just in trouble just as fast going up as it does coming down. And you know, the same companies that run their business well when it's going up are the same companies that are going to survive when it's going down. And your values can never change. Your values have to stay the same. And the importance of the organization understanding what those values are and not chasing chasing something that a new guy came into the market and wants to offer to the customers. You have to stick to your values. And you may not grow as much as somebody else in a boom time, but you're going to be a lot better off in the downtime. So a consistent set of principles and values of which you run your business, you'll be fine going up and you'll be fine coming down.
Easy to say, probably hard to do because we all get excited. We all get excited.
By the way, I got a Rolex for sale over here.
Yeah, just quickly on the values thing. I mean, back in 2009 when we were downsizing, we didn't know where the bottom was, right? So at the time we were doing $240 million in volume. 2 years later, we're doing 90. Think about that.
That's what we'd call a religious experience.
Yeah, I found religion. But it would have been nice to have some key core values to step back and get out of the fog of war and reflect on, because we made some bad choices. We made some decisions that were based on financial metrics and not on people, and we've paid for it over the past couple of years. So I agree.
Interesting deal. There's a lot of uncertainty. A lot of this is about agility, being able to be light in your feet and react quickly. So as this audience is listening, and even though it's Sunday morning, I can just tell that most of them are still awake. There was a movie called City Slickers with Jack Palance and Billy Crystal and the dudes in the Dude Ranch, and Billy Crystal kept talking to Jack Palance, and they wanted to know the one thing, right? This little Norman the cow. So what I'd like to do is just kind of go through each one of you, if there's thinking about the future, if you want to be thriving and prospering and be one of the strong guys 10 years from now, what would be the most important thing that this group should be thinking about? If they're just one thing, and I'm going to let Brian go first and we'll work around.
All right. Thank you for picking me to go first, Michael. For me, you know, we don't know what it's going to be, we don't know when it's going to happen, but we do know things are going to change. And what's clear to me is that change is going to accelerate versus decelerate. So my one thing for everyone is condition yourself, condition your organization, be open, accept, and embrace change, and build an environment where it's okay to try different things, where you can experiment in a secluded place and understand what happens, and you can take big chances in some parts of your business as a individual leader of part of your business and fail and still be rewarded for making, you know, for making the aggressive change. So it's really about recognizing product life cycles are going to shrink, competitors are going to emerge that don't exist today. Maybe there will be a new disruptive business model that we collectively have to deal with and build our organization around it. And for those of you that didn't see it in the paper, Yogi Berra celebrated his 90th birthday on May 12th. And his quote about the future is, "The future ain't what it used to be."
David White.
You know, so the one constant in business, it's been around forever, it'll be here forever, is people. So I think you got to continue to invest in your people, have an offensive HR strategy about how you develop your people and talent in your organization.
Walt Reynolds?
I 100% agree. I was going to say, you know, the people that you put on the bus, it's everything. And they interviewed the Google CEO the other day, and they asked him what was the most important thing that an executive could have today, and it's ability to interview.
Say that again.
The ability to interview and bring in people in your organization that believe what you believe.
Okay. David Witz.
We talked about the modularization. I won't go there, but the fact is that in the construction trades, we're going to experience in the next 5 to 10 years at least a 20 or possibly 30% manpower shortage. That's not talking about qualified people. That's just talking about absolute. So as you sit here and think about how could you service contractors, think about that. I mean, not only in Chicago, certainly our wage rates are at $100 an hour. We're looking for every which way we can to reduce that because of competitive pressures. But in an absolute term, there is a shortage coming like a freight train, and we are ill-equipped to handle it.
Amir Paul, what's your take? The one thing.
You know, I think it's really about partnerships. No one player in this industry, whether you're manufacturing, distribution, contractors, can navigate this alone. And so have the right partnerships and go deeper, because the experimentation and the change that comes, you have to have an ecosystem that you trust that you're part of.
And by the way, my one thing is we're actually doing some focus groups at 11:45 with some distributors and some manufacturers, trying to improve the way we do special pricing authorizations, as this industry is not the poster child for how to do it right. So if you've got any interest in that, please contact me. But please join me in thanking our panelists for their contribution, and thanks for staying awake.